Well, good morning. My name is Victor Branch, and I'm chair of the Richard Bland Committee for the Richard Bland College and the College of William and Mary Board of Visitors. Welcome all participants and members of the public participating via Zoom and watching on the Board of Visitors website, as well as the rector and members of the board joining for the public hearing regarding tuition and mandatory fees for fiscal year 22. Today, the William and Mary Board of Visitors is meeting virtually in accordance with item 4-0.01.g of the 2020 Appropriation Act, which provides governing boards with the ability to hold meetings electronically without a quorum present while the Commonwealth is under a state of emergency. This hearing will be held for 45 minutes. Additional time may be allotted if needed based on the number of participants who have not spoken. For those who would like to comment on tuition and fees, you can do so by submitting an online comments form. The form can be accessed on the board website. The address is wm.edu-bov-public hearing. Again, this is wm.edu/BOV/public hearing. You can also make a comment during the hearing today by joining us on Zoom. The Zoom link is available at the same address as the comments form, wm.edu/BOV/public hearing. After the opening presentation, we will accept comments. So it's great to have everyone here today. And why don't we just go ahead and launch in, and I will turn to Rector Littell to see if he has any comments.
No, thank you. Just glad to be here. So let's see what we got.
All right, thank you for joining us this morning. Well, it is my pleasure to introduce President Dr. Debbie Sato for a presentation. Dr. Sato, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In exploring a so-called post-pandemic future, the Chronicle of Higher Education published an article earlier this month entitled "Community Colleges Face a Long Road to Recovery." The article notes that, quote, "It's too early to say much for certain about the fall in terms of who's going to show up and how many. The same first generation and Pell eligible students who have been most at risk of dropping out during the pandemic are more disengaged, are failing more classes, and are not in contact regularly with college counselors as juniors and seniors in high school. That could mean declining numbers of high school graduates who are less connected to the idea of attending college and who are less prepared for transitioning to college and college level work," end quote. Much has certainly been written about the unknowns of a post-pandemic future, and these unknowns made the work of building the FY22 budget particularly challenging, as I know all of you can appreciate. RBC's budget managers at the departmental level and the financial services team are to be commended for their due diligence in working through the unknowns to deliver a budget that prioritizes student affordability without compromising the exceptional student experience that defines RBC's brand promise. In a few moments, Chief Business Officer Paul Edwards will present RBC's FY22 operating budget and the accompanying tuition and fee schedule, which will be presented later this morning to the RBC Committee of the Board of Visitors. The FY22 budget reflects state general fund support appropriated for Richard Bland College based on final actions of the 2021 General Assembly. And it anticipates tuition and fee revenue based on 20,000 credit hours for the 2021-2022 academic year. That projection, that enrollment projection, is roughly level with the previous year's enrollment. Although mandatory fees would increase by 3% to partially offset direct costs in FY22, we are acutely aware of the financial challenges facing many RBC students and their families. Therefore, we are proposing that tuition remain the same as last year with no increase. Likewise, there will be no increase to room rates for residential students. Every year, it's a challenge to build a budget that optimally applies very limited funding to deliver a high quality, affordable education to students in our Petersburg and surrounding community, many of whom are first generation and Pell eligible and have suffered disproportionately during the pandemic. I will reiterate that this year, the challenge of presenting a balanced budget was compounded by COVID. Nevertheless, the FY22 budget that you are about to hear in detail aligns with RBC's 2025 strategic goals, even as it contemplates a post-pandemic future. Although we are sincerely grateful for the federal and state financial support that has been provided to mitigate revenue losses due to COVID, our focus is squarely on rebuilding enrollment in FY22 and in the years thereafter. We have remained diligent in building a budget that supports academic excellence and an exceptional student experience as our core mission and as Richard Bland College's #1 priority. Chief Business Officer Paul Edwards will now present the FY22 budget to include proposed tuition and fees, and we welcome all comments at the end of this public budget hearing. Paul.
Thank you, Dr. Saito. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to take the next few minutes to go through some details of our FY22 budget with you. Lisa? There we go. So as you can see on the screen, we have we are going to propose a balanced budget for FY22 to the tune of just under $27 million. Next slide, please. As Dr. Saito mentioned, we went through many considerations and we considered various alternatives. And here are some of our assumptions, and this is where we landed. We are going to keep a 0% tuition increase, so we're going to remain level with our tuition. We are proposing a 3% mandatory fee increase, and this, again, is the purpose of this is to partially offset some direct costs that we're going to experience in the new year. Tuition and fee revenue, as Dr. Saito mentioned, is based on 20,000 credit hours. Having said that, SEM is our strategic enrollment management goal, and that is 25,000 credit hours, just to point that out. And another assumption is that we are expecting to go back to something more normal, not quite exactly to where we were in FY20, but something closer to that as it relates to our in-person/online split. You can see in FY20 at the bottom of the screen was our last quote unquote normal year, and we were roughly 88% in person versus 12% online. You can see in FY21 how that dramatically changed due to COVID-19, with 38% in person, 62% online. And with FY22, again, we are expecting a return to something more normal with 69% in person and 31% online. And that projection is also inclusive of our new RBC online initiative. Thank you. As it relates to auxiliaries, as Dr. Saito mentioned, we are not going to raise housing or dining fees, and our auxiliary revenue is budgeted on 251 students being in our dorms. Here's a little slide that gives you a sense for our costs as it relates to other public four-year schools in the state of Virginia. The four-year public average for FY21, when you looked at mandatory and non-mandatory, or E&G fees rather, it was just over 13,000, whereas for RBC it was $8,160. In FY22, a fully Pell eligible student will receive $6,495. And the reason I wanted to point that out is that means that with our structure, a fully Pell eligible student will only be out of pocket roughly $1,600. That's about what they would pay in their own costs. And then, of course, with our generous foundation, many of those students can receive other scholarships and reduce those costs even further. So here is just a brief detail of where we expect our revenues to be generated from. You can see tuition, separate line for fees, our auxiliaries, appropriations from the state, and then other revenue for a total of just under 27 million, as I mentioned earlier. In this slide, you can see this is what we are expecting from the General Assembly and the governor for the upcoming year. In the left part, you can see those related items and what we received in FY21. Commerce Hall support, compliance, and financial aid. Those things did not occur in FY21. We did get $1 million from the state as it relates to affordability for FY21. That was very helpful. For FY22, we are receiving support from the state for Commerce Hall. That is a conversion. We're going to convert that to an E&G facility. We are receiving $503,000 in compliance funds, an additional $154,300 in financial aid, and then related to affordability again, a little bit more than this previous year at $1.2 million. So as you can see here, our support from the state is roughly $3.1 million over that 2-year period. Some assumptions as it relates to our expenses as we were building our budget. Some key things to keep in mind is we budgeted based on 145 FTEs. That's the full-time equivalent for the employees. We went through an extensive multi-year compensation plan study. So we have considered that is completed. We are making those adjustments in the new year. So our budget assumptions also take into account for the effects of the compensation plan and those results, and the 5% salary increase from the state. As Dr. Saito mentioned earlier, our increase in the fees is to help to partially cover that increase. It will not cover it entirely, but it is to help partially cover that. And here is a line by line of our expenses. You can see the various lines here. Won't go through them, but it's pretty clear. We have our salaries in the first several lines, or financial aid, and then as well as our non-personnel services. Again, this is the just under $27 million that I had spoken about. Balanced budget. And I believe the last slide should be our entire budget. Oh, not yet, one more. Wanted to point out that we are really focused, as Dr. Saito mentioned, we're really focused on operational efficiency and doing everything we can to support our mission critical items. So very, very front and center, top of mind is that we are prioritizing our mission critical spending. Some of those things that we're particularly focused on is our RBC online program, our enrollment marketing, as well as some process and student services improvements. We are reducing administrative costs where possible. We are in the process of a structural reorganization. This will definitely help with our costs. We are strategically outsourcing services where possible, and we are also in the beginning stages of implementing or bringing up a shared services consortium. And then, of course, we are deferring non-mission critical investments. These things are going to be key as we move forward with our strategic plan. And lastly, this is the one slide I was mentioning a second ago that I jumped ahead a little bit. Here is our proposed budget, our balanced budget for FY22. Gives you a snapshot of the entire budget. At this point, that is the end of my prepared remarks. Dr. Saito, I don't know if you had any other remarks or if we want to open it up for questions.
Why don't we go ahead and receive comments and/or questions?
Mr. Chairman, you want to just review the guidelines that we'll use for the public hearing?
I certainly will. Thank you, Mr. Fox. The guidelines are as follows. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes to allow everyone a chance to participate. Each speaker must limit their comments to only proposed tuition and fees and their intended uses. And if you would like to make a comment, please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. People will be called on in the order in which they raise their hand. Once elected, the host will request you unmute yourself to speak. So each member of the board will be sent a link of today's public hearing, and all comments will be accepted and shared with the full board. Do we have any speakers? Any?
We don't currently have anyone.
Mr. Chairman, Lisa, have we received any written comments from anyone in the public?
We have not. We received 0 submissions on the public comment form.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you and the committee would just be at ease through 9:45. We'll look to see if any member of the public would like to jump in and speak.
Thank you, Mr. Fox.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just jump in every 5 minutes or so to let people know who may be viewing that this is a public hearing on the tuition and fee recommendations by Richard Bland College. And this public hearing will run through 9:45. Chairman, just every 5 minutes, I'll check in just to remind everyone this is a public hearing on the tuition and fee recommendations by Richard Bland College for fiscal year 22. If any member of the public would like to speak, if you would raise your virtual hand in the Zoom link and the chairman will call on you. Mr. Chairman, I believe we do have a member of the public who would like to speak. Mr. Newby.
Hello, I just have a quick question regarding the budget. I'm sorry if this was already covered during the presentation, but I wanted to know what was included in the budget to improve recruitment or the student experience at Richard Bland specifically?
Mr. Edwards or President Saito, it is just a public comment specific to tuition and fees, but if you wanted to address the question posed by Mr. Newby, you're certainly welcome to do so.
I was looking to see if Dr. Sato was going to chime in. I mean, I can say that, so I don't oversee those specific areas. I can tell you that there are funds that are directed to the to those areas. I don't have a great answer, to be honest with you, but I'm probably not the best person to answer this particular question. Actually, I don't know if Tyler is on or if Dr. Saito is available to answer.
Yes, I would just like to point out that the college has engaged with the American Council on Education in a project that is called the Learner Success Lab. And part of the reorganization that was mentioned earlier in the presentation is intended to make sure that we have appropriate staff. So there are expenses related to personnel that very specifically go to transitioning from what we have previously called the exceptional student experience to engage in an 18-month-long project, again, as a member of a fairly elite cohort of colleges that are part of this Learner Success Lab, which is specifically focused on improving graduation and success rates for our students. So there is that very specific investment. And the other aspect of the student experience that I would focus on is related to launching a new program, RBC Online, that is intended to expand access for students, in this case, specifically non-traditional students who will have the opportunity to complete courses, programs, and credentials online with a focus on reducing time to completion and entry into the workforce. So there are any number of additional investments in this budget. Again, the primary focus as we built the budget was to, while we are maintaining affordability for students, to also retain the quality, accessibility of our programming. And as Paul mentioned, I do want to emphasize that the additional investment in our workforce and specifically our faculty through the compensation plan that is intended to ensure that every single member of our faculty is paid in accordance with fair market value. That's another major investment in the FY22 budget that goes directly to the quality of our educational program. I do appreciate the question, and I appreciate the opportunity to give a bit more detail.
Thank you so much. That was a great answer.
Chairman, I'll do this a couple more times, but a reminder to members of the public, this is a public hearing to receive comments on tuition and fee recommendations by Richard Bland College for fiscal year 22. And this will run until 9:45. If anyone has any comments, please do raise your hand in the virtual Zoom. Chairman, again, just a reminder that this is a public hearing to receive comments on the recommended tuition and fees by Richard Bland College for fiscal year 22. If anyone would like to speak, please do raise your hand in the virtual Zoom. This will run until 9:45. Chairman, one last time for me, just to remind everyone, this is a public hearing on the recommendations for tuition fees for Richard Bland College. for fiscal year 22. If anyone would like to make a comment, please do raise your virtual hand. This will run until 9:45. Mr. Chairman, it is 9:45. If you would like, you may close the public hearing at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. I want to thank all the members of the board who participated and all the members of the public who participated as well. This public hearing now stands adjourned. Thank you.